Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, where your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host per usual. Uh, what do we got tonight? So, last night, UFC and ESPN 56, an okay fight night card on paper with a bad main event that played out more or less like that. Don't let the stoppage fool you. That main event sucked. Not the only fight that sucked on that card, but that was the one that a lot of us were kind of like, yeah, what are we doing here? But we'll review that this Saturday. We're back in the warehouse for UFC on ESPN Plus 99. Not the worst Apex card I've ever seen, but also let me confirm that that's accurate. Um, you know what? I take that back. I'm not going to say this is the worst Apex card they've ever put out because I can't order them off the top of my head like that, but this is not a good card. This is very much not a good card. And I'm not going to feel bad about saying that. Might come through in practice, but on paper, that is utterly skippable. Oy. We'll preview it because that's what we do here. Then a little bit of, news, not a whole lot. Some stuff from last week that I didn't get to too much, or like very earlier in this week. There's some stuff from last week, like late last week that I didn't talk about that kind of carried over into the start of this week, and there's, just some stuff like that. So we'll go over all of that because that's kind of what we do here. So I think that's everything I've got on the preamble. So anything you can do to help the show, like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review, you know the deal by now, and you know if that helps. Whatever works for your podcast platform of choice, that's what we encourage you to do here. All right. Let's jump into this, shall we? UFC on ESPN 56. They were in St. Louis, Missouri. Um, at a gate of 2.47 million. Pretty darn good. Nice to have a crowd, even if they did woo like 2 seconds into the first fight of the freaking evening. Drunken primates. That's all they are. Drunken primates. Do not encourage. I hate that the woo came over here into MMA. In pro wrestling, at least it has context. You do it because of Ric Flair. So you only do it in a couple of times that are associated with Ric Flair. The knife edge chop and going for the figure four usually will get you the woos. Other than that, it's not everywhere. Again, it has context. In MMA, it's just again some drunken idiot shouting it, and then it just kind of echoes and gets picked up by a bunch of other people who are inebriated or just bored or groupthink kicks in. I don't know. Nothing good. It's terrible. Please stop. I really wish it would stop. But as for the predictions, how did we do? Because that's how we start these things. Not bad, not great, but not bad. Still positive. We did lose one fight before the event. Kevin Jusset and Jared Gooden fell out. Gooden had some kind of a medical issue related to his weight cut. Unfortunate. I think that would have pushed me a little bit higher into the positive. Ultimately, again, better than 50-50, 7 and 5. I'd rather it was higher, but what are you gonna do? I have nothing. I have nothing that I can do about that. Which of these that I got wrong bothered me? Only one bothered me. A couple of the others I went, yeah, you should have known better. But no. Like the main event, because I picked Rodrigo Nascimento, and I don't know. Like I don't care enough to actually like put effort into picking crappy heavyweight fights. Um, Picking Despain over Waldo Cortez Acosta was a little odd. Gonna be honest there. I'm not mad about getting Fajera and Rembeshki wrong. I'm a little disappointed with I'm not giving Fajera more of a chance. I still would have picked Rembeshki, I think, but there's kind of a reality to Rembeshki fights that Ferreira was prepared to take advantage of, and I should have been more keen into that being a very real possibility. But the only one that I got wrong that I'm bothered by, honestly, is the Terrence McKinney and Esteban Ribovic's fight. Picking Terrence McKinney to beat someone who isn't made of paper is a real dubious proposition, and that's the only one. Like day of Friday evening and then Saturday morning, I was stewing on that one. Like, really? You know better than that. You know better than that. You know how that's gonna go. I don't know if I shouldn't have some kind of a potential audible I can call. Like, I can't. The thing is, like, if I build in the potential for abusing that, then all trust in this whole exercise disappears. On the other hand, there's a few of these fights that I wind up doing either a little bit more research on or just thinking about more clearly as we get closer to. So I don't know. I might give myself a couple of these that like I allow a change in pick, as long as it happens before the fight starts. Like once the fight starts, you're stuck. Is kind of my thought there. So, but because that one bothered me. Like that's the only one that bothered me. Like that. The rest of the ones I got wrong, fair and square. Can't complain about it. You make predictions. Some of them you get right, some of them you get wrong. So 7-5 for the card. 134-64 with 3 no contests on the year. I'm okay with that. I am okay with that. I'd like to get better, more on the positive side than where I was here, but it's an individual card thing. So that's where we stand. As for the fights themselves, so this should not take long. There's not a lot to talk about. Main event, this fight sucked. Um, Derek Lewis defeats Rodrigo Nascimento, TKO. They call it a KO. Be super generous KO. Yeah, TKO, 49 seconds into the third round. Not a good fight. Lot of clinching through the first 2 rounds. I think I had it 1 round apiece going into the third, and then Lewis does finally land a clubbing right, hurts Nascimento, gets the stoppage. I never want to see. Here's the thing about Derek Lewis. He does the same thing every time, and you're just gambling about whether or not he's going to find a punch. Because if he does, he'll get a stoppage, and that's what people will remember. And if he doesn't, the fight really sucks. And then for some reason, this is true of Derek Lewis. This is true of Holly Holm. There's a few people this is true of. Whenever you bring them up, people remember something fondly. Anytime I bring up Derek Lewis to my friends who are lapsed MMA fans or super casual, if I bring up Derek Lewis, the response is, oh yeah, hot balls. Guys, can we be honest for just a second? Okay, the hot balls thing, that took place at UFC 229 when he beat Alexander Volkov. Great comeback win. He was getting the crap beat out of him. Volkov got a little sloppy in the third, and Lewis got the win. I give him credit for that. A lot of people would have been finished well before that, and he gutted through some really bad spots. Not taking anything away from him in that respect. UFC 229 was in 2018. Now that may make you feel old as heck. It certainly makes me feel, a little bit old. But understand, this big thing that mimetically implanted itself into the consciousness of the people who watched it, 6 years. And let's see how many fights Derek Lewis has had since then, shall we? Lost a title fight, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 6 years and 14 fights ago. And some of those fights, terrible. Some of those fights were not, he just performed horribly. His title fight with Daniel Cormier, comical. He got ragdolled and beat up, and then choked out. Fight with Junior Dos Santos, again, he had nothing for JDS. Late stage JDS, by the way. Wins a terrible split decision against Blagoy Ivanov, I thought he lost. Terrible fight with Ilir Latifi. Beats Alexei Olenek. Beats Curtis Blades. He lost the first round. Then Cyril Gahn beats the crap out of him. He beats Chris Daukaus, then he gets knocked out brutally by Tai Tuivasa, gets stopped by Sergey Pavlovich, gets choked out by Sergey Spivak. And his fight with Gelton Almeida from last year, one of the worst fights I've ever seen. One of the worst, certainly one of the worst fights of 2023. But all anybody remembers of this guy is a 6-year-old meme from an interview. Like, this is it. This is where we are. And look, man, Holly Holm's the same way. Anytime you bring her up, oh yeah, she head kicked Ronda Rousey. We like Holly. People, I have nothing but respect for Holly Holm's MMA, combat sports career in general, right? Nothing but respect for it. She's 42. She's still out there. She's still mostly competitive. Okay? So, nothing but respect for Holly Holm. The Ronda Rousey win was 9 years ago almost, in November of 2015. By the way, she lost 3 fights after that. Kind of thought she should have beat Jermaine Durandamy, but that's a different discussion. And then, so she knocks out Ronda. That was her first finish in the UFC. Her next finish was when she knocked out Betch Correia, June of 2017. That's the last time she finished anybody. Okay? That's it. 2 finishes in, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. She has 16 UFC appearances. And she has, of her wins, hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 UFC wins. 2 finishes in 8 fights, in 8 wins. Again, nothing but respect for Holly. Nothing but respect for her. But this weird thing that happens, because I know people who watched her knock out Holly have watched some of these, not knock out Ronda rather, excuse me, have watched some of these other fights. I know they have. I know they watched her fight with Jermaine Durandamy, which was not good. I know they watched her fight with Chris Cyborg, which was. I know they watched these fights. And for some reason, goldfish brain kicks in, and we just forget we forget the years of uninteresting, boring fights. And I don't know what to tell you. But Derek Lewis has some of that going on. Derek Lewis is almost 40. Bless him for still being out there doing it. I don't know what the future holds for him. Nascimento, whatever. Again, this fight was not good. It was really not a good fight. Co-main event. This was a pretty good fight, actually. Joaquin Buckley defeated Nursultan Rizboyev, unanimous decision, 30-27, 30-26, and 29-27. You could have gone, what round was it? It was 2 or 3. I want to say it was one of those second or third rounds. Forgive me, I can't remember off the top of my head, and it's very late, and I am not had the best of weeks. One of those rounds, you could have gone 10-8, and I don't think it's unfair. It's a slightly generous 10-8, but I don't think, when I say slightly, I don't mean, again, not out of bounds. I didn't go 10-8, but you could, and I don't think it, again, not wrong. Again, when I say slightly generous, because there's clear 10-8s, and there's borderline 10-8s, marginal ones. This felt a little more marginal than definitive to me, but being marginal doesn't mean giving 10-8 is wrong. It just means it's marginal. What happened there? A lot of good movement out of Buckley. Mostly, the majority of his big success came because he was able to out-grapple Rizboyev. He hurt him at one point, but he spent a lot of time at different points, like in full mount. It's a really good performance from Buckley. After the fight, he called out Conor McGregor, and I don't know why this came back, and I don't know who to blame for it. But he did that, Conor, I know you come from a long line of hoes, and you're going to add your name to that list if you don't respond to this. Conor's not going to respond to this. It's not that I don't appreciate the fact that he did say, you're coming up to lightweight, to welter, but you're fighting a blown up lightweight and you're trying to bully guys like Sean O'Malley and Ryan Garcia. Come fight a real welterweight. It's not that I think he's inaccurate in his assessment there, but Connor's not going to entertain that at all. At all, at all. So, um, as far as one of the things about Ruzboyev, I was very curious to see how he'd look at welterweight. He made the weight. He's a big guy. Dude's like 6'5", cutting to 170. But he made it, and I don't know. I don't know which weight class is better for him. I honestly haven't. He's got a somewhat limited pool of UFC experience, so showed some a little bit not one dimensional. Once he decided on something he wanted to do, he kind of fixated on it. There was not a lot of sort of dynamic tactical adjustments going on there, and Buckley was able to avoid a bunch of the flying knees, which Rosboyev was really selling out for. Solid win from Buckley overall. Light heavyweight, Carlos Ulberg knocked out Alonzo Menifield in 12 seconds. Menifield tried to bum rush him. Ulberg countered. Dropped him with a left hook. He kind of wobbled back up, and then he dropped him again. Ulberg, that man has grown and matured as a fighter kind of before our eyes. He came into the UFC very, very young in his career. Lost his first UFC fight. I believe it was Kennedy Nzechukwu. I forget exactly how he prefers it pronounced. But he's been aces since then, man. Long, patient, powerful. Dude could be a problem. Light heavyweight is kind of a wasteland. He could be a problem. He could be a problem for that weight class. What should have been your fight of the night, but wasn't. Next up, Diego Ferreira defeats Mateusz Rebecki via TKO, 451 of the third. So I talked a little bit about how I wasn't. I should have given Ferreira more of a chance than I did when I talked about this. Let me explain part of the reasoning there. Rebecki is a guy who comes out very hot, but fades. And I didn't give that enough credence when I previewed this. I still, to be abundantly clear, I think I still would have picked Rebecki, but I should have given more chance, more play to the possibility of Ferreira dealing with a tough first round, but being steady, being very good, and winning down the stretch. Here's the thing about Rebecki. He pretty much always wins the first round of a fight. Ridiculous amount of pressure. He actually dropped Ferreira near the end of the round. Good stuff, but he's all gas. All gas, no brakes. That's not sustainable for 15 minutes. Second and third rounds start coming around, and normally what he's done in the past, if he can't get the finish early, or like early in the second, a lot of what he does after that is utilize his good takedowns, because he's got great timing on his double legs. He's got good takedowns, and then pass to a good position, usually half guard, and be able to maintain that. Now, I don't mean lay and pray. That would be a bit disingenuous to his skill set. But get the takedown, get a moderately secure control position, do enough to not be stood up, and the other guy not be quite good enough to get out from under him. And kind of, again, ride that out. And that seems like I'm being negative, but it's just a tactical assessment. And the other thing is, like, I've never seen him just, again, hold on and do nothing. He's on top, and he's doing enough not to be stood up. Is it enough to, like, put the other guy in serious peril, potentially win, get a stoppage? Not always, but it's certainly still active, and that's worked thus far for him. That's not something you can do against Diego Ferreira. Diego Ferreira's guard is good, and he's also very good about getting up. He's always in good shape, even though he's almost 40. He weathered a really tough first round, But as the fight wore on, he kept landing his jab. He kept he swole up both of Rembeshki's eyes, cut him over the right eye, just battered him. Second round, Rembeshki wins the first, loses the second. Anytime he goes for a takedown, he tries passing, but most of the time when he tries to pass, he can't get all the way over the. He was always passing to his left, so he can't quite get over the right leg of Fajeda. And if you can't get all the way across the knee, you're basically giving them a really nice butterfly hook. And Fajeda was constantly using that to off balance. He elevated, almost did like a helicopter, I think called a helicopter sweep. I know you do the helicopter arm bar out of it, where you like get them up, get their hips on your feet, elevate them up so they're completely off the ground. You see like dads do this with their kids all the time. You can do it with your legs instead of your arms. And kicked him off, but just you're giving them a very powerful tool if you can't get all the way over there. And Fajardo's good enough to block that kind of passing, or at least keep that in play. Constantly getting up, constantly countering, constantly reversing. Got Mount. They could have stopped this earlier. Honestly, there were a few different fights here that could have been stopped due to strikes earlier than they were, or the other guy went to a different technique to get the finish. Some odd reffing choices in a few of these fights. This was one of them. They could have stopped this much earlier. Again, Rembeshki got beat up. Fajardo, not like he got out unscathed. He was in a fight. But this should have been your fight of the night. It was technical. It was fast-paced. It was great. But there was a fight on the prelims that was low-level guys just swinging haymakers at each other. And we all know that's Dana White's favorite subsect of MMA. So really good win for Fajardo here. Tough loss for Rembeshki. See if he's able to kind of figure some stuff out going forward from this. Hope he recovers, because again, he took a pretty serious beating here. Featherweight, Sean Woodson defeated Alex Caceres for unanimous decision, 229-28 and a 30-27. I like Sean Woodson's game, but man, does he need to. I don't know exactly what's missing from it. Trying to figure this out in real time. He's very long. He's very tall for the weight class. He fights very well at range. Got a good jab, some long kicks, shows knees all the time to dissuade takedowns. Very talented guy in that respect. He's got smooth hands. He's not always great about forward pressure. And it's not that he doesn't throw in combination. That's not accurate. But it feels a little bit like when he's throwing, there's not a tremendous amount of like great adjustment to the defense of his opponent. Now, this is not the biggest deal in the world. Be very clear about this. But he's kind of going through, almost going through his pad work. Now, he'll choose which kind of combinations he wants to do, depending on some of what his opponent's doing. But if he's got a guy constantly, weaving or rolling the same direction, he'll maybe shift to an uppercut, but he's not going to change the angle of his left hook, even if the other guy has a read on it. And it means that after a little bit, he kind of misses a lot and then has to sort of reset and pick a few different things instead of making some more real-time adjustments to his elements of his offensive weaponry. He's able to land a fair bit. He won this fight pretty clearly. I thought it was competitive, but I felt very confident that Woodson had won it by the end of it. There just does seem to be a little something missing. And he's had a lot of success even without this last little bit to put him over the edge. And I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure what it is. Because he's got good power. Not necessarily the most fight-stopping power every time, but he's long and he hits you a lot, so he doesn't necessarily need to be, Francis Ngannou, one touch, you're dead. But again, I'm not quite sure what it is that's not, there's just some little thing, and it's the majority of his game is very good. He's great about stopping takedowns against the fence. He's good about dissuading them in some open space with weapons that he chooses. But some of his offensive potency is just dulled a little bit at this point. Partially, I think, by guys and coaches having seen a lot of him. There's a fair amount of tape on him at this point. So being able to get reads on some of what he likes to do is becoming a bit more common, and it's just kind of muting some of his offense, which is still effective. But he used to be able to really light guys on fire. Now he'll get about 3 minutes worth of that over the course of a fight where he's really rolling. But if he doesn't really hurt you in that stretch and then push that advantage, it tends to go away. And then he'll try to find something. Again, it's part of the natural ebb and flow of a fight. But it's become a bit of a pattern for him at this point. So, look, if I could know exactly what was missing from that, then I'd be, a very good MMA coach, and I'm not. But I do think there's a little something kind of missing from that, and maybe the incorporation of some elbows would do wonders for him. He's got those long arms, and if guys get inside, start folding some of those over. I don't know. That's a thought because he uses knees quite well, but there is just a little something that isn't quite isn't quite there in his game because he's getting some of these fights where look, I felt very confident that he won the last fight he was in, but that went as a split decision when he fought Charles Jourdain. There's been some of these fights that he's getting the nod, but it's it's close, and you kind of look at some of these fights and go, this is closer than it needs to be. And I'm not sure what the best thing for him to do to kind of mitigate what little thing, because it's only a little thing, man. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's kind of missing. When he figures it out, if he does, he's gonna really, really hurt people. But there's something there that's just not, it's not quite clicking. And look, I still think he's got a very, very high ceiling. He won this fight. He's going to be ranked when this is after this. He should be fighting more ranked opponents. He's very good. But I'd be lying if I said I thought this is his final form. There's wish I knew what it was. There's a little something that's going to push him just a little bit further if he can find it. If his coaches can figure it out. Maybe it's just a mental thing. I don't know. I really don't. I know that there's something not all the way there for him yet. And the fact that he's this good without that last little bit says a lot about him. And this comes across like I'm being overly negative, and I'm really trying not to be because he's very good. But there is something that's not quite there, and I have to call it like I see it in that respect. As for Caceres, I mean, dude's been around for like 11 years at this point. Let me double check that. Longer. Jeez. Yeah, his UFC debut was March of 2011. So he's over 13 years at this point in the UFC. He kind of is where he is. He's going to get some wins. He's going to get some losses. He's probably coming closer towards the end of his career. I mean, he came into the UFC 5-2. So we like 7 fights off of his. Yeah, he's had 30 UFC fights. I mean, that's some impressive longevity. I take my hat off to him in that respect. At this point, he's a tough out. He's certainly not a gimme, but he's there to be kind of a veteran gatekeeper slash step up test for guys they're curious about where they're going to stand in the division. Kicking off the main card, this fight sucked. Waldo Cortez Acosta defeated Robelas de Spain via unanimous decision, 230-27 to 30-26. 30-26 was not warranted. Um, yeah, Despain was better on the feet, landed some leg kicks, was able to punch him, kind of wobbled him once, but good old Waldo just was able to clinch up, get takedowns, and Despain had nothing on the ground. Um, just nothing. There's stuff he should know how to do by this point. Even, junior into his MMA career, 5-0, 5-1 now. There's stuff you should know how to do if you're on bottom that he was not demonstrating much knowledge of in this fight. Yeah, this fight sucked. Because Cortez Acosta's ground and pound is not exactly scintillating. On the prelims, Chase Hooper, good grief, man. He dropped Vyacheslav Barshev with a left hand in the first round. Barshev's a good striker, but especially early, he takes some time to get his reads, and you can catch him there. He got caught, dropped. Hooper on the ground just. If you've never seen a black belt like decide they're done playing with like a good blue belt or even a purple belt, that's kind of what this looked like. Just nothing for him. Because I'm not going to call Barshev a white belt here. He was doing way too much with way too much heart to be called that. But the skill differential there was significant. Hooper just rode him, flowed position to position, landed at 10-8, 10-7, you could argue. Second round, Hooper gets a pretty quick takedown. Keeps landing a bunch of strikes, and again, this probably should have been called. He puts a nasty knot on Barshev's head. But the referee won't call it, so in a bit of a scramble, Hooper grabs a Darce choke, rolls to tighten it up, and as he's starting to move in, because one of the ways you help finish a Darce, or an anaconda, or even guillotines, you kind of, you put, depending on the guillotine variation, you want to keep their head kind of in your chest, and then you get your hips closer to theirs. So you're putting like their head and neck as the pivot point in an angle, and it compresses everything down there. One of the ways you try to stop this from happening is whichever arm you have free, you reach up and you try to block their hips. So you try to keep pushing them so you're in a straight line instead of a folded line. He reached up trying to find the hips and kind of just tapped Hooper's back, misreading where the hips were, and then immediately started, putting his hand on the hips. Referee mistook this for a submission, called the fight. Look, I can understand why the referee might have thought that was a tap. It wasn't. The referee got this wrong. Now, Hooper was beating the crap out of that man anyway. So, Chase Hooper really starting to come along. But the referee, look, it's okay to say it's understandable that the ref got this wrong, while also saying the ref got this wrong. But this was not going his way, Barshev's way at all. Really, really big performance from Hooper. Really big. Lightweight, Esteban Ribovic head kicks Terrence McKinney 37 seconds into the first round. Really nice combination. McKinney switched southpaw to try and open up something as Ribovic was coming forward. Ribovic then, I went back and forth on how I pronounce that guy's last name. I apologize. Where I put the emphasis. And switching to the open stance, if you're not ready for it, that power leg is going to be able to come around. Kicks him right in the head, sits him down, knocks him out. Didn't get a bonus for this, which shocked me. I'll go over the bonuses because I would have handled these differently. But really nice knockout. Really nice knockout from Ribovic. Your fight of the night was a donk fest between Trey Waters and Billy Goff. Waters just landing shots a lot. Goff just walking through them, being very tough. A lot of sloppy brawling here. A lot of action. They fought this by the time we got to this, like midway through the second round, these welterweights looked like heavyweights. That's where the technique and cardio went. But again, Dana White loves that kind of crap, so that was your fight of the night. I don't agree with that call. But if you want a dumb action fight, you could do worse. Flyweight Charles Johnson defeated Jake Hadley via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the boards. Close fight. Pretty fun one, actually. Hadley started okay, but started fading. Johnson just kept on good pressure. Once he was able to not only block takedowns, but block even clinching on the fence, Hadley struggled pretty mightily. Johnson, after the fight, said, I'm the best 5-round fighter, but I'm stuck in the 3-round world. That's probably true. Um, he's lost he's lost a few of his last fights. But if you watch them and you watch the trajectory and the momentum of those fights, he loses them because he doesn't really have a great first round for a lot of reasons. Not that it's always bad, but he doesn't always win. He very rarely, I think, wins the first round. And then he gives up enough of the second to usually lose it. But by the last minute, 90 seconds of the second round, he's usually starting to come on. And then he almost always wins the third. So it's not that difficult to imagine that if there were 2 more rounds after that, he'd continue to do well because his cardio is kind of insane. He doesn't really get tired, and so again, I think that's a fair assessment. Like, get this guy into some 5-round fights, and he's gonna do some stuff. Unfortunately, flyweights only fight 5 rounds when it's for the belt because the UFC hates putting them in main events. But I think that was a bit of sober self-assessment there, and he mentioned him trying to work on that a little bit. Credit to him. Pretty good win. Johnson's good. Watch his fence wrestling in particular. There's a lot you can take from that. And kicking everything off, Veronica Hardy defeated J.J. Aldrich for unanimous decision, 29-28 across the boards. First 2 rounds to Hardy, third round to Aldrich. Not a whole lot going on there. Yeah, that was the card. So your bonuses, your fight of the night, I mentioned Trey Waters and Billy Goff, which this is like giving an award to, Transformers. It's dumb, and you're not going to remember anything about it. But in theory, it's not boring. And again, Dana White loves these kind of fights, so what are you going to do? I would have given this to Fajera and Rambeshki without too much hesitation. It was a much better fight in every way. Every way. Performances of the night went to Carlos Ulberg and Diego Fajera. Now, if I'm giving Fajera fight of the night, which I would have, also because Rambeshki, that poor man, there's no way he was paid enough for the abuse he took. No way at all. But if I give that fight of the night, that does free up one of these performances for Esteban Ribovics. Because, again, that's just how I would. I'm fine with Ulberg getting one, actually. But I would have gone like Ulberg. Clearly, I would have gone Ulberg and Ribovics, and then Fajera and Rambeshki get fight of the night. But I'm not in charge of these things. I just talk about them. So, what are the rare times when I disagree with I disagree with like a majority of the bonuses? Last thing here is a minor note. The UFC did a nice little tribute to Art Jimerson. Competed at UFC 1. He passed away recently. Was from St. Louis, so was a nice touch. Yeah, that's the event. Again, my full report, MMAZona411mania.com. So go give that a listen, give that a read if you're so inclined. I always appreciate the fact that some of you guys not only listen, but read what I write and all that good stuff. Alrighty. Yeah, that didn't take very long. Okay. Well, there wasn't a lot worth discussing there. Moving on. UFC on ESPN Plus 99. Back in the warehouse in Las Vegas. Do we have about order for this? I need to double check this because we might. I don't know if we do. Um, no, I don't think we have a finalized bout order or where the break is from prelims to main card. Oy. Okay, you know what? No, last thing I want to mention briefly about UFC and ESPN 56. Um, there's some I don't like using the word cringe, unless I'm specifically describing uh, an action. I don't like to describe things that way. But there are some cringe-inducing moments at that post-fight presser, man. Somebody asked, like, Derek Lewis took his cup after the fight and he gave it to somebody in press row, which, one, disgusting. Two, that guy then asked Dana White to sign it. What the... Um, some other MMA media personality asked if it was possible for Donald Cerrone to brand her. I assume like cattle. Guys, I was one of the people about 8 years ago who had a lot of complaints with how MMA media was going about some of their jobs. A lot of them were very obsequious to the UFC. They didn't want to lose their access, so there weren't a lot of hard questions. There wasn't a lot of actual journalism going on, and it was a valid complaint at the time. And a lot of those news organizations and some of the journalists heard that complaint and kind of took it to heart and started doing a little bit more research, started doing a little bit more genuine journalism. And the UFC didn't like it. And it turns out like the fans that wanted that out of the MMA media, a lot of them left. And the new crop didn't want it. The new crop wanted stupid sound bites and I don't know what they want. It's sad. It's sad and tragic almost. So, again, there were legitimate complaints to be made about MMA media. There were some steps taken to try and correct that. Then a lot of people decided that wasn't what they wanted, and a lot of the legitimate journalists and legitimate outlets got, blacklisted. And now we have I'd said this before, like I'm going to reference someone here, and this is not an individual whose success I begrudge. I don't like her content, but I don't have like moral objections to its existence. But if everyone's Nina drama, what a giant waste of everyone's time this is. Again, that's not to say that, she's some hack. I don't think she is. I don't like her stuff. It's not aimed at me. None of what she does is appealing to me at all. But I don't object. Again, there is an audience for it. Fair play to her. I'm not out here calling for her to be, blacklisted or boycotted or anything like that. I'm using her as an example of I don't mind that kind of stuff exists, but I don't find it interesting. I don't find it useful. I don't find it anything. And when everything turns into that, this entire exercise is, again, a waste of everyone's time. Now we've got media members asking for the UFC president to sign used athletic equipment. Or if a retired UFC fighter would be willing to inflict hot metal scarification. I'm just... It's just sad. It's just sad, and there's not really another way to phrase that. All right. Moving on to this fight card. So I'm going to go on the current this is the order listed on the UFC's website. It's the order listed on the wiki. I think it's the order listed on Tapology. No, Tapology has a slightly different order here. Slightly, so I don't know who's correct. I really don't. Um, so we're just gonna go with, again, the order. This is the order on the UFC side is the order that's on the wiki, so that's what we're going with at the moment. And I freely accept that this is not the order of things when it's all going to be said and done. Okay. Sorry, I need to fix something very quickly. Come on. Come on. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Okay, yeah, we're gonna go with this, and we're gonna see how this goes. I told you already, this is not a good card. It's just not. I don't have anything positive to say about this. Main event is good. Let me do that. The main event I actually kind of like. Edson Barboza, longtime UFC fighter at this point. His UFC debut was 2010, so 14-year veteran of the UFC. Has scored some very impressive knockouts, some very impressive stoppages. Been in some darn good fights. His fight with Tony Ferguson is a great fight. I think his fights with Paul Felder are very good. So you get a lot of respect there. 2-fight winning streak. But he's 38, and again, he's 38 with how many fights in the UFC? Hang on. So he came in at 6-0 to the UFC. So if we take 6, yeah, this will be his 30th UFC fight. Um, that's a lot. And he's fighting a younger up-and-coming guy who's only 32. This is Lerone Murphy. Murphy has never lost. He fought to a split draw in his UFC debut with Zubaira Tukhugov. Since then, he stopped Ricardo Ramos, beat Douglas Silva de Andrade, that was very impressive, knocked out Makwan Amirkhani, beat Gabriel Santos, and beat Josh Kulabau. This is a non-trivial step up for him. So let's admit that first and foremost. Non-trivial step up. But it's kind of a question of, what does Barboza have left versus is Murphy ready to start peaking? And again, those are fair questions to ask of any fighter in particular, and this one in particular. So let's have a look here. Barboza's gone 5 rounds before, but Barboza can be hit, can be hurt. I think this is Murphy's first 5-round fight, yes? He was scheduled for 5 on the regional scene before he debuted in the UFC when he won a regional title. But he won that in the first round. Yeah, this is his first 5-round fight. That's 5-round UFC fight. And probably the first 5-round fight he's had scheduled that is likely to get out of the third. He's a good counter grappler, and Barboza's done a little bit more grappling, certainly more clinching. This is a close one. This is the best fight on this card by a fair margin. The odds are a little bit with Murphy, which I think is fair. Is Barboza really... Is he really poised to kind of drop off? I mean, a lot of people thought he was going to drop that fight with Sadiq Yusuff his last time out, and Yusuff faded down the stretch. Yusuff had him hurt badly early. Couldn't quite put him away, though. Billy Quarantillo was poised to give him problems with pace and pressure, and then Barboza timed a knee. I mean, a lot of people were ready to write Barboza off after the Giga Chikadze stopped him, then Bryce Mitchell just beat him down for 3 rounds. I'm also going to mention, I imagine Murphy's probably, he's certainly a more technical fighter than Yusuf. It's a tough one. I'm going to go with Murphy. Not by a huge margin, but I think this probably winds up resembling a bit more the Chikadze fight than the Yusuf fight over the duration of the fight. Um, yeah, and the rest of this is, there's only like one other fight on this card I'm somewhat interested in, so we'll get to that when we get to it. Let's just go down this list again. Currently, the order we have, probably not the finalized bout order, apart from the main event being the main event. Welterweight, Chaos Williams and Carlston Harris. Williams, the Ox fighter. Beating up on castrated bulls, are we? Lost a split decision to Randy Brown. Thought that was a fair loss. Beat Rolando Bedoya by split decision. That was close enough that I wasn't going to complain. He knocked out his first 2 UFC opponents. Lost to Michel Pereira. Beat Matthew Semmelsberger. Beat Miguel Baeza. Lost to Randy Brown. Already mentioned. Beat Rolando Bedoya. Kind of in the middle. Not sure whether he's coming or going in some respects. I actually think fairly highly of Carlston Harris. His only UFC loss is to Shavkat Rakhmonov. He choked out Christian Aguilera. He TKO'd Impa Kasanganay. He beat Jared Gooden. He choked out Jeremiah Wells. I think pretty highly of Harris, and I am going to go with him to win here. Williams has some serious power, and that's not to be dismissed or overlooked, but I don't feel too bad about picking Harris here. Well, the odds are with Williams. Interesting. Look, I'm sticking with my pick, but it's a little surprising. That might shift by the time we get to fight night. Again, I'm not trying to dismiss Williams' chances here at all, but I think fairly highly of Harris's ability. Light heavyweights, God help us. Omar Sy and Antonio Trocoli. I believe both these gentlemen are making their UFC debuts because crappy light heavyweights are what we are cursed with these days. This is probably not going to be in this spot on the card. My hunch is this spot will go to Gorimbo and Brahima, or it probably should go to Yanez and Salvador, but whatever. Again, I'm going down. This is the order the UFC has listed. So whatever value you want to give that. Omar Sy, 9-0. Yeah. This is his UFC debut. He beat Luis Enrique da Silva. It's a name I know. I beat Ildemar Alcantara, too. That's not... I mean, Alcantara's kind of, I hate to say washed, but a little washy at this point. I mean, the man's had just a boatload of fights, so... So, C's in a... Psy? I forget how you do the SY thing in French. But Trocoli, 12-3, won no contest, 3-fight winning streak. Yeah, this is his UFC debut. He was supposed to fight. He's been out of action for a while. Jeez. He was supposed to. His last fight was November of 21. So 3-ish years. Sorry, 2 and change. 2.5. About 2.5, yeah. He was supposed to fight in 22 against Ovince St. Preux. That fell out, and he hasn't had another fight booked since then, so I assume it was an injury on his part that screwed that up. Um, that's a long layoff. I assume that was. I assume he had that issue. Yeah, whatever the issue was, it was with him. Couple of guys that I don't know a whole lot about. That layoff is kind of staring at me. I'm gonna go with C or Psy. I'll know how to pronounce it after this event, but so my apologies if I am wildly mispronouncing that gentleman's last name. Let's see, bantamweight next: Adrian Yanez and Vinicius Salvador. Yanez, I still think has a lot of ability, but Rob Font beat him, and then Jonathan Martinez beat him. And granted, two very, very good bantamweights. That halted a lot of his momentum. He debuted with with 4 bonuses in 4 fights. 3 stoppages, then a fight of the night, split decision with Davey Grant, then he stopped Tony Kelly. Another performance of the night. Fonten Martinez back-to-back really kind of did a number on him. Um, and his knee got torn up a bit in that Martinez fight. Curious to see how he's going to bounce back from that. Salvador. 14-6. I believe he's moving up from flyweight here. 0-2 in the UFC. Losses to Victor Altamirano and CJ Vergara. Yeah, those are both flyweights. He missed weight for the Vergara fight. So moving up to bantamweight, probably the right call. Hmm. I'm gonna go with Yanez. I still think he's got a lot of ability, but there's just some stuff that's kind of been exposed that needs to be ironed out. On the plus side, young enough, talented enough to address some of those issues. But they do need to be addressed, and this will be more. He fought two very, very tough guys. This is a step back for him. Probably a good idea that he takes this fight as a step back. So, yeah, I'm gonna again, think he'll get the win, but if he drops this one, there's some serious problems. Okay, okay. Next up, Luana Pinheiro and Angela Hill. I don't know how many times I've ever picked Angela Hill to win a fight. I know some, but Pinheiro coming off of her first loss in the UFC when Amanda Hebos beat her. Prior to that, she'd beaten Randa Marcos, illegal upkick, Sam Hughes, and then a split decision over Michelle Waterson Gomez. I recall thinking she won that fight, but... And then we got Angela Hill, who's fairly well known at this point. 39 years old. 3-4 in her last 7. But also 3-1 in her last 4. Um, I don't know. I imagine that this late stage kind of renaissance for Hill is due to expire at some point. Probably some point relatively soon. I don't know that Pinheiro is the one to begin exploiting that, is kind of my only question there. I don't know, man. It's not like Angela Hill's been setting the world on fire. Let me go with Hill, but I don't feel all that good about that one. Welterweights, Tembo Garimbo and Ramiz Brahimaj. So Brahimaj, been a bit up and down in the UFC. 2-2, lost to Max Griffin and Court McGee. Wins over Sasha Politnikov and then Michael Gilmore. Garimbo probably should win this. Garimbo I mean, the man's not exactly a world beater, but 12-4, what? 2-1 in the UFC? Yeah, 2-1. 2-fight winning streak. Takashi Sato and Pete Rodriguez. I kind of feel okay going with Gorimbo here. Again, I don't know that Brahimai has really sparked much enthusiasm from me. Middleweight, Abu Smagomedov is back. He's fighting Warley Alves. Now, Warley Alves is an interesting case because the man debuted for the UFC a decade ago, winning a season of The Ultimate Fighter Brazil. In fact, he just passed his March, April, May. He will have his 10-year anniversary, 10-year birthday, basically, in the UFC this year, later this month, May 31st. Had a good run initially. Here's the thing about Mr. Alves. So let's do this, shall we? Fights twice in 14, twice in 15, twice in 16, once in 17, twice in 18, twice in 19, not at all in 2020, twice in 21, not at all in 22, and then twice in 23. Currently on a 3-fight losing streak to Jeremiah Wells, Nicholas Dalby, and Ikram Aliskerov. So missing 2 full years and never really getting like 3 fights in a single year. Some of the losses too kind of derailed him. Which ones in particular? Honestly, the Kraus loss. I mean, earlier he lost to Brian Barberina, the Kamaru Usman. I mean, Usman's Usman. But losing to James Kraus, that one kind of hurt. Randy Brown hurt. Again, just struggled with consistency. Not with the consistency, because he's been fairly regular, but he's struggled with really mounting momentum. 3-fight losing streak. He might still have enough to beat Magomedov, who is profoundly unimpressive. I don't know. Am I really going to pick Warley Alves here? How old is Alves? Again, he's been with the UFC for a long time. He's only 33? Dang. That's... It's tempting to pick him. The odds are with Magomedov. And they might be trying to get him a win. I mean, that's a little bit disingenuous to phrase it that way, but he's just... The losses to Sean Strickland and Kyle Bahalio were kind of rough. And again, it feels like they're trying to do a little bit of something with him for some reason. Do we want to go with reading the tea leaves, or do we want to go with, I don't think he's very good? Neither of these guys are cardio machines. If Alves was like known for good conditioning, I would take him. 3 fights in a row. No, I'm just... This is going to go dramatically one way or the other. These are both kind of fighters inclined to the dramatics. I'm really going to pick Magomedov. Or a guy who hasn't won in like 3 years. That's a tough one. That is a real tough one. You know what? No, I'm going with Alves. I am very prepared to be very wrong about that one, but that's where we're going. All right, lightweight, Victor Martinez and Tom Nolan. Let me find these two. Where are they? Okay, so Victor Martinez is a lightweight, 13-5. Right. He got stopped by Jordan Levitt. It was Levitt's first TKO, and Had a fight with Trevor Peek fall out. Nolan 6-1. Also lost his UFC debut. He fought Nicholas Mata. So that's a little bit of a tough one. Probably Nolan. The odds are heavily with Nolan. Man, if you could get like 3.25 to 1 on Victor Martinez, that is actually kind of decent action. I'm gonna go with the odds here, but that's dicey. That's a lot closer than those odds suggest. Strawweight, Piero Rodriguez and Ariane Carnelossi. Carnelossi coming off a loss to Lupita Godinez. She's gone 2-2 in the UFC. I feel like Rodriguez has done worse than her in general. So I'm confusing Rodriguez. I am confusing Rodriguez. Um, Piero Rodriguez is 9-1. I want to say 1-1 in the UFC, 2-1 in the UFC. Coming off a loss to Jillian Robertson. Prior to that, she beat Kay Hansen and Sam Hughes, neither of whom are necessarily all that good. This does feel a little bit like Rodriguez. Not by a whole lot, but I'm going to go with Rodriguez. All right, and a couple of more here. Vanessa Demopoulos and Emily Ducati. Demopoulos, a little up and down. 4-2 overall in the UFC. That's nothing to sneeze at. Good grappler. Coming off a win over Kanako Murata. Whereas Ducati, excuse me, had a couple of losses. 2-2 in the UFC. Lost to Angela Hill and Lupita Godinez. Coming off a win over Ashley Yoder. I kind of want to lean towards Demopoulos here. I don't know. Ducati's actually pretty good. Again, she's had some struggles, but she's demonstrated a fair amount of skill. Yeah, let me go with Ducati. But that's very winnable for Demopoulos. But Demopoulos, if she keeps falling in love with her striking, that's not really her forte. Bantamweight, Alatong Hele and Clegerson Rodriguez. Alatong Hele, we have a loss to Chris Gutierrez. Very good overall UFC record, though. Just kind of been at the lower end of the division. Clegerson, I believe he's moving up here. Is he not? I remember him being more of a flyweight. Let me double check that. No, he's always been a bantamweight. Okay, I might be confusing him with somebody else. He's 1-2 in the UFC. He's missed weight. He had a fight fall through, so he lost to CJ Vergara. I feel like that was a flyweight fight. I'm used to seeing Vergara as a flyweight. Let me double check that. It would have been early. Yeah, that was flyweight. Okay, when did he move up? Was it the Shannon Ross win? No, that was still flyweight. He missed weight for that. So when he fought Farid Basharat, that would have been at bantamweight. Okay, there it is. There's where he moved. I feel like this is probably Alatong Hele's fight, but I don't know by how much. Odds are actually with Rodriguez. Interesting. They just consider Alatong to be just kind of a hang-around guy. Do I consider him to be just kind of a hang-around guy? Huh. I actually think I'm gonna go with Alatong here. But I don't know about that one. And a women's bantamweight fight between Tamaris Vidal and Melissa Gatto. Melissa Gatto has gone 2-2 in the UFC, which is on a two-fight losing streak to Tracy Cortez and Ariane Lipsky. Whereas Vidal, I recall being at least moderately impressed with. Might be mistaken. She's 7-2, 1-1 in the UFC, coming off a loss to Montserrat Randon. I am confusing her with someone else. But I think that just changes a little bit here. Cause her UFC win is over Ramona Pascual, and then she lost to Randon. Gatto stepping in on somewhat short notice to replace Haley Cowan. I'm sure that plays a bit of a role here. But Vidal has not looked all that great. I know who I was confusing her with. Another quick look at Gatto real fast. Okay, yeah, the UFC has not updated that because that is not accurate anymore. Gatto is 8-2-2. Yeah, lost her last two. That Lipsky fight was relatively close. Yeah, let me go with Gatto. I think there's more upside there. Wait, is Vidal coming down or is Gatto going up? It's short notice, so I kind of assume Gatto's moving up to bantamweight for this. The size difference might play a role there, though. If you're gonna lean towards Vidal, the size is going to be one of the things you're half kind of leaning on there, thinking about. I'm still going with Gatto. I think she's a better fighter, but worth noting, she is moving up in weight. And that is the card as it currently stands. So Saturday, in the MMA Zone 411mania.com, I will be covering this event. So, okay, if I'm going to do this where I give myself one of these that I can switch last minute, which one or two do I want to do that for? Okay, give me two on this one that I might be able to change my mind on. Ducati and Nolan. Ducati, really? Nolan, I reserve the right to again mess with the Nolan fight. If I get a second one, is that or Olatong Hele? I don't know about that one. I don't know. We'll see. I don't imagine invoking that too much on this card. Again, there's only been like two or three times that, as the week wore on, I kind of went, "You got that wrong," and you know you got that. You know you're gonna get that one wrong, but we'll see. And I hope you just indulge me with that little thing, especially with some of these lesser fight nights that I'm trying to put stuff together. All right, so Saturday again, I'll be covering it like usual. Okay. On last night's event, the UFC revealed the full main card for UFC 302. Let's talk about that real quick. So this is the Makhachev and Poirier card. Dang it, that is not where I... is not where I thought it was going to be. Do we not have a bout order? Do we just have the full card? I think what we know is like. So I think we have the 5-fight main card. It's Islam Makhachev and Dustin Poirier, Sean Strickland, Paulo Costa. That's actually a worrying fight if you're a. Fun fact about Paulo Costa. Every time he's fought on a card where a title was defended, and he was not. The exception to this rule is the time he fought for the belt. But anytime he's fought on a card with a title fight that does not involve him, that title has changed hands. It's a very weird sort of statistical anomaly for him, but it's in play if you believe in that kind of stuff. Oh, sorry. That's actually not a bad fight. So, and then it was announced we were adding Randy Brown and Elijah Zaleski dos Santos to that main card. That's a fine fight. My hunches will also have Cesar Almeida and Roman Kopylov, and maybe if we're lucky, Tatsuro Taira and Joshua Van, rounding out the main card. This is 1, 2, 3. That would be the 5-fight main card, presumably. That's how I would lay it out. If you wanted to swap out one of those, Kopylov and Almeida might be the one you swap off of the main card in favor of what? Because the UFC is the UFC, Almeida and Romanov. If there's one of those, and again, they also might just swap out the flyweights because the UFC doesn't like giving flyweights shine. Anyway, so that got revealed. That's a perfectly fine pay-per-view card. I'm not complaining that much about it. Coming up in a couple of weeks, so I think we'll be previewing that next. Will we be previewing that next week? No, we're taking the last week of May off. Because there is no event the 25th. Okay. Yeah, again, we're a few weeks out, but that's a pretty solid pay-per-view on paper. Not like 303, which is McGregor and Chandler, and is a joke. That is just. They are praying nothing happens to McGregor or Chandler, because if something happens to either of them, the rest of that card is kind of crap. Just being honest. It would be a very, very crappy pay-per-view, certainly. All right, let's talk very briefly about Jon Jones then, shall we? Because this started a little bit last week with Jon going on a Twitter bit about why he should be fighting Stipe next, and I know why Jon wants the Stipe fight. I do. I really do. But I don't. Let me rephrase. I don't want the title involved in that fight. You have a clear-cut number one contender. You really do. You have another guy with a belt. And he then went on to do Alex Pereira is a really interesting fight after that. Get Pereira to come up to heavyweight. See if he can avenge the other guy who beat the crap out of his head coach. Because Jon beat the crap out of Glover Teixeira. And everyone is kind of crying foul at this. Like, what are we doing here? So here's the thing. If Jon wants some, what he considers more marquee attraction, money fights, then the belt needs to not be in play. If you're the champion, you have obligations and responsibilities. The problem is there's almost no real money to be made if you don't have the belt, so you're in this odd position where you're trying to get both, and that's log jamming the division. And look, I don't care all that much about heavyweight. It kind of sucks. But this is profoundly unfair to the fighters, who are the only people actually suffering over this. I mean, somebody pointed this out. Okay? The last time Stipe Miocic fought, bless him, most successful UFC heavyweight champion ever. But the last time he fought, he was brutally knocked out by Francis Ngannou. You know what happened during that same time? So again, since Stipe Miocic was knocked out by Francis Ngannou, Jose Aldo had 3 fights, won 2 of them, lost to Merab, retired for 2 years, came back and beat Jonathan Martinez. That's all for Jose Aldo happened since Stipe Miocic's last fight. That's how long Stipe's been out of the cage. Like, again, long enough for Jose Aldo, an all-time great, to fight a few times in MMA, including losing a tough fight, losing a fight at altitude, retiring, boxing 2 or 3 times, I think there was one exhibition in there, come back to the UFC and beat a rising contender. Like, what? And look, some of that's not Stipe's fault. Injuries happen. I get it. But that's the reality of the situation is this is what we're doing here. And trying to defend it as anything other than Jon managing the tail end of his career, which I don't blame him for, and the UFC going along with this because they seem to think it's a more lucrative fight is just weird. It's just weird. So, I don't know. And trying to defend it as anything other than that is just a waste of everyone's time. Trying to then fight Alex Pereira, I'm not I'm not going to sit here and accuse Jon Jones of ducking Tom Aspinall in the sense that he's afraid of him. Jon's calculus is what's the most money I can make for the lowest risk. And that's fair calculus if you're a fighter. But that's the calculus. I don't think he is afraid of Tom Aspinall in the sense that, oh no, this guy's going to beat me if we fight, and I'm afraid of that. I don't believe that Jon's operating like that. I believe Jon's operating on, well, I can beat that guy, but, ... It's a very big challenge, and I don't think it will provide the return on investment and the financial payoff that some of these other fights will. And again, that's fine calculus. Most fighters do that calculus. What offers the biggest reward with the smallest risk? The reality is you just at some point have to take disadvantageous fights because you're not in a position with any kind of leverage. Jon has a degree of leverage, and he's trying to do that. And for some reason, he and the UFC are in agreement about wanting to make the Stipe fight, which, again, I don't understand, but I don't need to. But I don't know who wants to see that fight. I genuinely don't know. Like, Stipe's been gone for so long. Like, there's a good chance there's a fair chunk of the current fan base who doesn't know who Stipe Miocic is. Which is weird to say, but I think it's true. Not all of them, not enough that he's going to be crickets when he walks out. But you're out of the game for like 4 years. There's a chunk of the fandom that's going to turn over during that time period and a chunk of new ones that are going to come in. Anyone who came on with like the Sean O'Malley hype train, no idea really who Stipe is or why he's special. Just if you want another example of that. So that's, again, kind of where some of the talking points are going, and everyone pushing back against Jon. Like, nobody wants that fight except for Jon and the UFC. And if those are the people that want it, then it's going to happen no matter what the fan base wants. So, all right, that's all of that. Let me check Twitter. That's all I've got written down for news. And if nothing crazy is broken, we'll do plugs and get out of here. Nope, nothing new. So, plugs. Last week, I had a double shot of podcast. There was a Damn You Hollywood for the Fall Guy. That was myself and Mark Radulich. We talked about that movie and kind of why it fell flat, a little bit on its face. Then Wednesday, I was part of the TV party tonight for the FX miniseries Shogun. That was hosted by Alexis Hana, featured myself and David Wright. We talked the show, acting, costuming, set design, history, because David is, as a fairly serious academic history studying East Asian or Near East history and culture and whatnot. So we talked about some of that too, because Shogun is based on actual. It's found again based on historical events. It's not a history retelling of them, but based on and cool. So we talked about that. That was a good time. This week there is no Damn You Hollywood. Mark Radulich is barely going to be back from a rock festival, so we're waiting to review Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes for next week. Other than that, covering WWE SmackDown on Friday and UFC on ESPN Plus 99 on Saturday. We'll be back here next week for a review event of UFC on ESPN Plus 99. No preview because there is no, I already went over this, there is no UFC event for the last Saturday in May. The week after that, we'll be back to preview UFC 302, which is quite solid. So that's what's coming up for us here. All right, that's it for me. You know what? No, let me do this real fast. It is Mother's Day as I'm recording this, so thank you to all of our mothers out there. Do something nice for your mom. If you didn't, call her today. If you have a very poor relationship with your mother for good reasons, find the other maternal figures in your life, mothers, grandmothers, aunts, anything like that that will that deserve appropriate recognition for fulfilling that role in your life. So thank you all again. Thank you to your mothers. My mother is fond of saying that she passed through the valley of the shadow of death to bring us into the world, because I have 3 brothers, and that's probably true. So we're very, very grateful for all that you do out there. Say something nice to your mom. And if you did yesterday, do it again today when you're listening to this, because I know this isn't going out until the day after. So do it again. Don't let this be like a year, like twice a year thing. Don't be one of those guys. Don't be one of those guys. All right. That's it for me for this week. Thank you all very much. Back next week. See you then. Until then, stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.